Hello and welcome to History Sleep Stories. From a distance, Kharg Island looks unremarkable, a low stretch of land resting quietly in the blue of the Persian Gulf. There are no famous skylines, no crowds, no reason for most people to ever learn its name. Yet every day, decisions made on this small island ripple outward, touching fuel pumps, shipping lanes, factory floors, and household budgets across the world. Modern life, with all its motion and convenience, leans more heavily on Kharg Island than most would ever imagine. The global oil market feels vast and abstract, a web of tankers, prices, contracts, and distant negotiations. It appears too large to depend on any single place. But complexity often hides fragility. Beneath the scale of the system are narrow points where enormous flows are concentrated, compressed into specific routes, terminals, and moments. Kharg Island is one of those points, a quiet hinge on which immense volumes of energy turn. What makes this contrast so striking is how little attention the island receives outside specialist circles. While headlines focus on major cities, wars, or dramatic choke points, Kharg Island operates mostly in the background. Oil arrives through pipelines, is stored in massive tanks, and then moves onward by sea, largely unnoticed. The process is routine, almost mundane, and that normality is precisely what makes it powerful. As long as it continues uninterrupted, the world rarely asks where the oil comes from or how precarious that flow can be. Yet history shows that when such systems are disturbed, the consequences travel fast. Prices react, markets tighten, and uncertainty spreads far beyond the point of disruption. Kharg Island sits at the intersection of geography, economics, and politics, where local events can produce global effects. Its importance does not come from size or population, but from function. It exists to move energy, and energy remains one of the foundations of modern civilization. There is a temptation to think that resilience is guaranteed, that redundancy elsewhere will quietly compensate if one link weakens. That assumption feels comforting, but it overlooks how carefully balanced global supply chains really are. The calm surface of Kharg Island conceals layers of planning, protection, and constant attention, all aimed at preventing interruptions that most people never think about until they feel them directly. This story begins with that imbalance between visibility and significance. A place almost unknown to the public holds influence far beyond its shores, shaping outcomes in countries that will never see it. To understand why Kharg Island matters is to see how the modern world truly works, and how easily the ordinary rhythms of daily life can depend on places we barely notice at all. In the chapters ahead, the island's location, history, and role will slowly come into focus, revealing how geography and industry converged here. What first appears insignificant will begin to look deliberate, even inevitable, as the map tightens and the machinery behind the calm shoreline becomes impossible to ignore. This quiet beginning is only the surface of a much larger story unfolding. From the quiet shores introduced before, the story of Kharg Island begins to take shape in space as well as in consequence. To grasp its outsized role in global energy, one must first understand its position on the map. Kharg Island lies off the southwestern coast of Iran, just a few dozen kilometers from the mainland province of Bushehr. In the shimmering Persian Gulf, it is modest in size, roughly 8 kilometers in length and about 4 kilometers at its widest point. Yet, despite these small dimensions, its location is far from incidental. It occupies a natural anchorage, sheltered from the worst of the Gulf storms, while remaining directly along the maritime routes used by tankers bound for every continent. In other words, Kharg Island sits at the crossroads of local geography and global logistics. Viewed from above, the island's contours appear deceptively simple, flat stretches of land, dotted with industrial structures, surrounded by shallow waters that gradually give way to the deep lanes of the Gulf. This simplicity belies a complex reality. Kharg is a bridge between the Iranian hinterland, where crude oil is extracted, and the vast network of international shipping that carries that oil to refineries worldwide. Pipelines snake across the mainland, converging on this point, transforming crude from distant fields into a concentrated resource ready for export. Geography here is destiny. Unlike ports that struggle with seasonal winds, currents, or congested coastlines, Kharg offers a natural efficiency, allowing ships of enormous capacity to dock, load, and depart with minimal interruption. Its proximity to major oil fields amplifies this advantage. The Iranian oil network is sprawling, stretching from the deserts and plains of the interior to the south coast, yet Kharg acts as the final node, a funnel through which the lifeblood of the nation's energy industry flows. The pipelines connecting the mainland to the island are engineered with both volume and speed in mind, ensuring that even as demand fluctuates, the flow remains steady. Every meter of pipe, every pumping station along the route, is part of an unseen choreography that relies on the island's precise placement in the Gulf. Without Kharg, that choreography would require reorganization on a scale that would ripple far beyond national borders. The surrounding waters themselves reinforce its strategic value. Shallow areas near the coast act as natural buffers, protecting infrastructure from storms and providing calm harbors for loading operations. Beyond these buffers lie the deep shipping lanes that connect the Persian Gulf to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. A tanker departing Kharg enters these lanes almost immediately, moving from local geography to international significance within hours. The island's placement transforms a small landmass into a pivot on which global trade spins, connecting local production with global consumption in a seamless, almost invisible handoff. Human presence on the island is another dimension shaped by geography. Unlike sprawling coastal cities, Kharg's settlement is limited, consisting primarily of facilities, storage tanks, and housing for workers. This concentration makes it easier to secure operations, maintain infrastructure, and manage logistics efficiently. Every element, roads, docks, pipelines, is oriented toward maximizing throughput while minimizing risk. Geography, industry, and human ingenuity intertwine here, illustrating how a simple patch of land can become the linchpin of a far-reaching system. Visualizing Kharg in relation to neighboring countries further emphasizes its significance. Across the waters lie other Persian Gulf states, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, each with their own oil interests, pipelines, and ports. Yet Kharg occupies a unique niche. Its location within Iran's territorial waters, combined with natural anchorage and proximity to internal resources, creates a logistical advantage that cannot easily be replicated elsewhere in the region. It is at once a local hub and a global touchpoint, demonstrating how position on a map translates directly into influence in markets, politics, and international energy flows. Even in an age of satellite imagery and digital navigation, the island's importance is better appreciated when one considers scale. On a map, it may appear small, almost negligible, yet its footprint in the world economy is enormous. Each tanker that docks, each barrel that leaves its shores, connects distant regions and economies in a chain that stretches across continents. By grounding the story in physical space, the viewer begins to sense not only where Kharg Island sits, but why that placement, so unremarkable to the eye, has consequences that extend far beyond its shores. In this way, Kharg Island is both ordinary and extraordinary. Its geography is mundane enough to blend into the Persian Gulf, yet precise enough to shape the flow of one of the world's most critical commodities. Understanding this physical reality prepares the audience for what comes next: the mechanics of oil export, the historical events that have tested the island's resilience, and the ongoing pressures that continue to make it a focal point of global attention. From the map, the story moves naturally toward industry, strategy, and the human decisions that turn a quiet island into an indispensable linchpin of modern civilization. From its strategic position along the Persian Gulf, Kharg Island transformed quietly, almost imperceptibly, from a modest island into a linchpin of global energy. In the early 20th century, Kharg was little more than a remote outcrop, occasionally noted on nautical charts but largely ignored by the wider world. Fishermen knew its shallow waters, perhaps, and a handful of local traders might have touched its shores, but there was no hint of the monumental role it would later assume. Geography set the stage, but human ambition and industrial foresight turned the island into something far more consequential. The first steps toward its metamorphosis were pragmatic and deliberate. Iran's oil production, concentrated inland and in neighboring regions, required a point of export that combined safety, accessibility, and capacity. Kharg's proximity to major oil fields made it a natural candidate. Early surveys identified locations for piers, storage, and pipelines, balancing engineering efficiency with the island's limited topography. These decisions were not made lightly. Engineers and planners needed to ensure that the facility could handle both present and projected output. Each square meter of infrastructure had to serve a specific purpose, moving crude from inland fields to awaiting tankers with precision, speed, and minimal loss. Pipeline construction was the next stage in the island's transformation. Stretching hundreds of kilometers across Iran's southern landscape, these pipelines acted as arteries, channeling crude oil from remote wells toward Kharg's shores. The engineering feats involved were enormous, particularly given the era's technological limitations. Pumps, valves, and pressure stations were placed strategically to maintain a constant flow, overcoming elevation changes, terrain obstacles, and the heat of the Persian sun. The system had to be robust, capable of operating under the pressures of both nature and politics, since any interruption could ripple outward with economic and diplomatic consequences. Once on the island, the crude oil needed storage, and that requirement dictated a new layer of industrial development. Massive tanks began to rise along the coastline, steel giants designed to contain millions of barrels. Their presence was imposing, low, cylindrical monoliths that seemed almost incongruous against the flat landscape. Yet their scale was functional, not decorative, each tank calibrated to receive, hold, and dispatch oil efficiently. The layout of the storage facilities was meticulously planned to allow rapid movement of oil, minimizing idle time and ensuring that tanker schedules could be maintained without disruption. Here, efficiency became a form of resilience. Loading and export facilities followed naturally. Long piers extended into the Gulf, accommodating the largest tankers of the era. Crude was transferred via pipelines that ran above ground on the piers, controlled by operators who monitored pressure, flow, and volume. Safety protocols were strict, not out of excess caution, but because a single misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Industrial discipline, technological rigor, and constant vigilance became part of the island's identity. What had once been a quiet, barely inhabited place was now a hub of calculated precision, where every movement of oil mattered not only to Iran but to markets around the world. The transformation also required human investment. Workers and engineers relocated to the island, creating a small but specialized population. Housing, roads, and support facilities were constructed to sustain them, turning Kharg into a functional community built entirely around oil export. The lives of these workers intertwined with the operation itself. Every shift, every maintenance task, and every technical check became a thread in a network that connected local labor to global commerce. Human presence added a layer of reliability, reinforcing the mechanical and logistical systems in place. By the mid-20th century, the scale of Kharg's operations had grown dramatically. Tankers from every continent docked to load crude, their presence a visual affirmation of the island's global relevance. Maps now highlighted the terminals, reports in trade journals noted production volumes, pipeline efficiency, and logistical precision. Kharg had evolved from obscurity into the central node of Iran's export strategy, and its loss would be more than symbolic. It would disrupt supply chains, affect prices, and create vulnerabilities in economies far removed from the island itself. The very invisibility that once protected it now underscored its strategic significance. The industrial landscape of Kharg Island also reflected foresight. Storage, pipelines, and terminals were designed not just for immediate needs but for scalability. Engineers anticipated increasing production volumes and larger tankers, ensuring that the island could handle growth without compromising safety or efficiency. This forward planning is one reason why Kharg remains central decades later, able to adapt to modern technology, new geopolitical pressures, and evolving global demand. Its role is not fixed by geography alone, it is maintained through continuous planning and technical mastery. Even today, standing on the shores or observing satellite images, the transformation is evident. Where once sand and low vegetation dominated, now steel, concrete, and pipelines define the landscape. Each structural decision reflects a history of industrial ambition, strategic thinking, and a careful alignment of human skill with natural advantage. The story of Kharg Island's rise is therefore not only a story of oil but a story of deliberate, patient engineering, a quiet evolution that turned a modest island into a critical gateway for one of the most valuable commodities on Earth. Through this lens, the audience begins to appreciate why Kharg Island matters far beyond its shores. Its function is a linchpin, and its efficiency a measure of the careful orchestration behind global energy supply. Losing it would not only be a loss of infrastructure but a disruption of trust, a fracture in the complex network that powers modern civilization. The island's transformation, from a largely ignored patch of land to a carefully engineered hub, lays the foundation for understanding its continuing relevance and the pressures it faces today. The next chapter will explore the complex intersection of these pressures with history, conflict, and strategy, deepening the story of why one small island commands such disproportionate attention and influence. From the steel and concrete arteries of pipelines and storage tanks on Kharg Island, the story stretches far beyond the Persian Gulf, reaching into economies, cities, and households across the globe. The transformation of a modest island into Iran's primary oil export hub, as we have seen, is not an isolated achievement, it is a critical node in a vast, interconnected network where every action produces consequences far removed from its origin. To understand Kharg's true importance, one must examine the flow of oil itself and the intricate systems that rely upon it. Here, the island's quiet infrastructure meets global economics, revealing how the fate of a tiny landmass can shape the cost of energy thousands of miles away. At its simplest, Kharg Island functions as a distribution point. Crude oil arrives from inland fields through pipelines, stored in enormous tanks, and loaded onto tankers bound for international markets. Each shipment is measured meticulously, every barrel accounted for, because these quantities directly influence pricing and supply. When thousands or millions of barrels leave Kharg's docks, they enter a marketplace where even small disruptions can produce ripple effects. A delayed shipment can tighten supply in Europe or Asia, altering futures contracts, influencing refinery schedules, and subtly nudging the prices consumers pay at the pump. The island may appear remote and insignificant on a map, but in practice, it exerts a form of economic leverage that touches ordinary lives. The butterfly effect of oil distribution becomes clearer when considering the mechanics of global supply chains. Modern economies are deeply dependent on predictable energy flows, which in turn influence transportation, manufacturing, and agricultural output. When Kharg operates smoothly, pipelines and tankers maintain rhythm, refineries process efficiently, and supply chains proceed without interruption. But any interruption, even temporary, creates cascading challenges. Industries may face higher input costs, transportation firms encounter delays, and consumers eventually notice these effects in rising energy bills or increased prices for goods. In this context, Kharg Island is both a physical hub and a symbolic representation of global interdependence, a single pivot point where small variations magnify into worldwide consequences. Shipping lanes amplify the stakes further. Tankers departing Kharg navigate through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, one of the busiest and most strategically sensitive passages on the planet. Here, geopolitical tensions, piracy risks, and maritime regulations converge, making each shipment vulnerable to disruption. A minor blockage or accident in these waters can have disproportionate consequences for the movement of oil. Analysts watch Kharg not because it is glamorous, but because the island is the starting point of a chain that determines how efficiently, and reliably, crude reaches the ports, refineries, and ultimately consumers who rely on energy every day. Beyond immediate logistics, Kharg Island also influences broader market psychology. Traders and investors monitor the island's output as a proxy for Iran's export capacity, using shipment volumes to forecast global supply and adjust pricing. In other words, the island does not merely move oil, it shapes expectations, market sentiment, and investment strategies. When Kharg experiences delays due to maintenance, political tension, or natural factors, ripple effects can push futures markets up or down, sometimes within hours. The tangible reality of physical shipments interacts dynamically with the abstract world of finance, demonstrating the dual influence of a small island, concrete and symbolic, local and global. The relevance to everyday life is surprisingly direct. When fuel prices rise at local gas stations, when airlines increase ticket costs, or when shipping delays inflate the cost of imported goods, these effects can often be traced back, in part, to shifts in production or distribution originating from key points like Kharg Island. Few people consciously connect their monthly bills to a stretch of land they will never visit, yet this connection exists, bridging geography with economics in a subtle, powerful way. Kharg's operation, therefore, is not just a matter of industry or engineering, it is a matter of lived experience, influencing routines, expenses, and expectations worldwide. This global significance also reinforces the importance of precision and reliability. Every tanker departure must be synchronized with storage availability, pipeline throughput, and port logistics. Any misalignment can trigger delays, creating bottlenecks that echo far from the Persian Gulf. The island's management must anticipate fluctuations in global demand, seasonal shipping variations, and maintenance schedules, all while monitoring geopolitical developments that could threaten the continuity of supply. The complexity of these systems illustrates that Kharg is not merely a passive export terminal, it is an active participant in a highly sensitive, high-stakes global network. In understanding this, one begins to see the invisible threads connecting Kharg Island to distant regions. Refineries in Europe and Asia, dependent on consistent crude supply, adjust processing rates based on arrival schedules. Energy markets in the Americas respond to projected output. Even policymakers, seeking to stabilize domestic energy availability, monitor the island indirectly through data on shipments, production, and tanker departures. The scale of impact is astonishing. A facility covering a few square kilometers, operating quietly in the Gulf, has influence that spans continents, sectors, and households. Moreover, the island's significance illustrates the interconnectedness of modern infrastructure. It is not isolated pipelines or storage tanks alone, but the combination of geography, engineering, shipping lanes, and global demand that gives Kharg its weight. Systems thinking becomes essential. One must recognize that energy flows are cumulative, dependent on multiple layers of infrastructure, and subject to feedback loops that magnify minor changes. Each barrel of oil leaving Kharg is not simply a commodity, it is a signal within a network, informing decisions, triggering reactions, and subtly shaping the global economy. Finally, acknowledging this network fosters a deeper appreciation of the delicate balance at play. Kharg Island is neither glamorous nor widely known, yet it operates at the intersection of geography, industry, and finance with remarkable precision. Its function demonstrates that modern civilization depends not only on visible cities, markets, and governments but also on small, strategically positioned nodes that carry weight far beyond their size. By tracing the flow of oil from inland fields, through Kharg storage and shipping infrastructure, and across oceans to markets around the world, one can begin to understand how one quiet island has a voice in the global economic chorus, subtle, yet unmistakable. In the chapters ahead, the narrative will move from economics to human history and conflict, exploring how this vital node has faced challenges, adapted, and maintained its indispensable role in a volatile world. As the global economic implications of Kharg Island became clear, its strategic significance inevitably drew the gaze of forces beyond Iran's borders. During the Iran-Iraq War, which erupted in 1980, Kharg Island became more than a node in an industrial network. It became a target in a high-stakes military contest, where every barrel of oil, every tanker, and every meter of pipeline represented leverage in a conflict that extended far beyond the Gulf. The island's transformation from a quiet export hub into a militarized objective revealed the fragility of even the most sophisticated infrastructure, and underscored how geopolitics and economics collide in places most people will never see. From the very onset of hostilities, Kharg's importance was unmistakable to both sides. Iraq understood that striking Iran's oil exports could cripple the enemy economically, weaken morale, and disrupt global markets, thereby influencing international perception and intervention. The island, with its concentration of pipelines, storage tanks, and loading piers, presented an opportunity for maximum impact. In this sense, Kharg was no longer just a point on the map, it became a symbol of vulnerability, a target whose damage could reverberate across continents. The challenge for Iran was immense: protecting a sprawling industrial facility while maintaining uninterrupted exports under the constant threat of aerial and naval attacks. Air raids became a recurring reality. Iraqi aircraft, often flying at dawn or dusk to exploit shadows and avoid early detection, targeted tankers, storage tanks, and piers. Explosions could be seen from the mainland, sending plumes of black smoke into the sky and serving as stark visual evidence of the conflict's intensity. Each strike was calculated, aiming not just to destroy physical structures but to disrupt operational flow, forcing delays in oil shipments that would ripple into international markets. The pressure on engineers and workers on Kharg was immense. The island had to function in the face of danger, maintaining continuity in the most perilous circumstances imaginable. Naval engagements added another layer of tension. Patrols, mine-laying, and occasional missile attacks made the surrounding waters hazardous for the very tankers that Kharg relied upon to transport oil. Ship movements had to be coordinated meticulously to avoid not only enemy fire but also navigational hazards created by the chaos of war. In this environment, logistics became an exercise in both precision and courage. The calm image of industrial efficiency from earlier chapters now had to contend with smoke, sirens, and the unpredictability of armed conflict. Every operation was a balancing act between maintaining output and ensuring the safety of personnel. Despite repeated assaults, Kharg Island's operations continued, a testament to the resilience embedded in its design and management. Engineers implemented redundancy systems, enabling pipelines and storage tanks to bypass damaged sections, while maintenance crews worked around the clock to repair strike-damaged equipment. Contingency planning became a daily routine. Supplies, spare parts, and emergency protocols were stockpiled and rehearsed, ensuring that even if a major component of the facility were compromised, the overall operation could persist. This adaptation highlights a critical principle. The island's significance was not only measured by its output but by the strategic foresight that allowed it to survive under pressure. The human dimension of Kharg during wartime cannot be overstated. Workers, engineers, and military personnel were forced to operate under constant threat, enduring air raids and potential sabotage while maintaining highly technical procedures. Shifts were long and exhausting, yet the continuity of exports depended upon their skill and discipline. This interplay between human effort and industrial capacity underscores the fact that infrastructure alone is insufficient. Resilience emerges from the alignment of people, planning, and place. The island became a crucible in which human determination was fused with technological sophistication, producing an outcome that few other sites could match under similar circumstances. The strategic calculus extended beyond immediate military objectives. Disruption of Kharg's exports could have provoked economic repercussions across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, raising oil prices, impacting trade, and potentially influencing political decisions in distant capitals. In this way, the island's defense became not merely a national priority for Iran, but a factor in global stability. Every successful shipment under fire was a subtle assertion of continuity in the face of forces that sought to undermine it, a demonstration of the delicate balance between geography, industry, and politics. Kharg's survival through repeated attacks illustrates a broader principle of critical infrastructure during conflict. Vulnerability invites attention, but resilience can transform a target into a symbol of strategic endurance. The island was no longer just an export terminal, it was a proving ground for engineering, logistics, and human endurance. Its continued operation during the war reassured markets and demonstrated that even in the midst of conflict, carefully designed systems, when paired with skilled operators, could withstand extraordinary pressure. This period reinforced the perception that Kharg Island's significance was tangible, not theoretical, a reality born out of fire and strategy, rather than abstraction. By the end of the Iran-Iraq War, Kharg Island had emerged scarred but operational, a testament to foresight, planning, and adaptability. Its survival illustrated the interplay of industrial engineering, geography, and human resilience, proving that even small, isolated points on a map could carry immense weight in times of crisis. The island's wartime experience would not only inform future infrastructure planning but would also cement its reputation as an indispensable node in global oil networks, one whose loss, even temporary, could have immediate and far-reaching consequences. As the world looked to rebuild and stabilize in the aftermath, the lessons of Kharg's endurance became clear: strategic location, robust design, and human commitment create resilience that transcends the apparent size of a place. The island's wartime story sets the stage for understanding the complex pressures it continues to face today, both natural and geopolitical, and prepares us to examine how modern threats, from sanctions to environmental risks, continue to test the delicate balance of this small but consequential outpost. In the next chapter, the narrative will shift from history and conflict to resilience and adaptation in peacetime, exploring how Kharg Island maintained its critical role despite ongoing pressures and evolving challenges. When the air raids faded and the explosions became part of the island's memory, the real test for Kharg Island began. Survival in war is one thing, continuity is another. After repeated attacks during the Iran-Iraq War, the island was scarred, its infrastructure damaged, its routines shattered. Yet oil continued to flow. Not uninterrupted, not effortlessly, but persistently. This was not an accident of fortune. It was the result of deliberate planning, rapid improvisation, and a quiet determination to ensure that a single point of failure would never define the fate of the entire system. Repairs often began before smoke had fully cleared. Crews worked under constant threat, sometimes at night, sometimes with incomplete information, always with urgency. Damaged loading arms were patched, pipelines rerouted, and storage tanks assessed for structural integrity with a speed that bordered on audacious. In many cases, the goal was not perfection but functionality. Temporary fixes kept exports moving while permanent solutions were planned in parallel. This layered approach, immediate repair followed by longer-term reinforcement, became a defining feature of Kharg's operational philosophy. The island learned to function in a state of controlled incompleteness, where redundancy mattered more than elegance. Redundancy itself became a form of resilience. Multiple pipelines linked the mainland to the island, ensuring that the destruction of one route did not halt the entire flow. Storage tanks were distributed and compartmentalized so that damage to a single facility would not cripple capacity. Export terminals were diversified, allowing loading operations to shift locations as conditions demanded. Each element of the system assumed that failure was not a possibility but an eventuality. This assumption transformed vulnerability into preparedness, turning Kharg into a living demonstration of systems thinking under pressure. Human ingenuity was the connective tissue holding these systems together. Engineers and technicians developed workarounds in real time, adapting equipment designed for peacetime efficiency to wartime necessity. When standard procedures failed, improvisation filled the gap. Spare parts were fabricated locally when supply lines were disrupted. Maintenance schedules were rewritten to reflect the reality of intermittent damage. Decisions were made quickly, often with limited data, relying on experience and intuition rather than formal protocols. This flexibility did not undermine safety, it redefined it, aligning operational risk with survival priorities. The persistence narrative extended beyond technical fixes to psychological endurance. Workers returned to damaged facilities knowing they might be targeted again. Normal routines, shift changes, inspections, communications, continued in an atmosphere of uncertainty. The act of showing up became a form of resistance, reinforcing continuity through consistency. Over time, this mindset permeated the island's culture. Kharg was no longer just an export terminal, it was a symbol of operational resolve, a place where stopping was not considered an option. Strategic improvisation also involved deception and adaptation at a higher level. Tanker schedules were altered unpredictably to reduce vulnerability. Lighting and visible signals were minimized to obscure targets. Decoy structures and misinformation blurred the island's operational picture for adversaries. These measures did not eliminate risk, but they redistributed it, forcing attackers to confront uncertainty. In doing so, Kharg transformed from a static target into a dynamic system, one that absorbed pressure rather than collapsing under it. Perhaps most striking was how lessons from crisis were institutionalized. Each attack, each repair, fed into future planning. Vulnerabilities were cataloged, response times measured, and redundancies strengthened. What began as emergency improvisation gradually became standard practice. The island evolved, not by returning to a pre-war baseline, but by incorporating stress into its design logic. This evolutionary resilience meant that even after the war, Kharg emerged more robust, better prepared for both military and non-military disruptions. This adaptability proved crucial beyond wartime. Natural wear, technical failures, and political pressures tested the same systems refined under fire. The mindset cultivated during conflict, anticipate disruption, decentralize risk, respond quickly, translated seamlessly into peacetime operations. Continuity became not just a goal but a habit, reinforced by experience. Kharg's ability to keep exports flowing was no longer extraordinary, it was expected, embedded into the island's identity. What makes this resilience remarkable is its quiet nature. There were no grand declarations, no public celebrations of success. Repairs happened, systems adjusted, and ships departed. The world saw the outcome, oil still moving, without witnessing the effort behind it. This invisibility amplified the island's importance. The less attention it drew, the more effectively it performed its role, reinforcing a paradox central to modern infrastructure: the most critical systems are those that function best when unnoticed. In the broader arc of Kharg Island's story, survival and repair are not just chapters of recovery but foundations of relevance. The island remains critical today precisely because it learned how to endure. Its resilience is not rooted in invulnerability but in adaptability, in the acceptance that disruption is inevitable and manageable. By continuing to function under pressure, Kharg demonstrated that continuity is a choice, sustained through planning, improvisation, and human resolve. As the narrative moves forward, this resilience becomes the lens through which modern challenges are understood. The skills forged in wartime, repair under pressure, redundancy by design, strategic flexibility, now face new tests in a different arena. Sanctions, surveillance, and geopolitical scrutiny replace bombs and missiles, but the underlying question remains the same: can the island adapt quickly enough to keep functioning? The answer, shaped by decades of experience, suggests that Kharg's story is far from over, and that its quiet resilience continues to define its role in the world. The resilience forged under bombardment did not fade when the last missiles fell. Instead, it evolved. In the years that followed open conflict, Kharg Island entered a new phase of pressure, one quieter than war, yet often more complex. Bombs were replaced by sanctions, air raids by satellite surveillance, and frontline danger by persistent geopolitical tension. The island remained intact, its pipelines still humming, but the battlefield had shifted from the physical to the political, from visible destruction to invisible constraint. Sanctions introduced a different kind of uncertainty. Where war threatened infrastructure directly, sanctions targeted the systems that made infrastructure viable: finance, insurance, shipping, and technology. Tankers could still dock, storage tanks could still fill, but every movement became entangled in layers of restriction. Companies hesitated, insurers recalculated risk, and shipping firms weighed profit against compliance. For Kharg, continuity now depended not only on engineering resilience but on legal and diplomatic navigation. Each export required careful orchestration, ensuring that transactions, routes, and partners aligned with an ever-changing sanctions landscape. This pressure reshaped daily operations. Scheduling became more fluid, with export plans adjusted to accommodate available vessels and willing buyers. Documentation grew more complex, scrutinized by multiple parties for compliance. Even routine maintenance was affected, as access to specialized equipment or replacement parts could be delayed or denied. The island adapted by relying more heavily on domestic expertise, local manufacturing, and alternative supply chains. What had once been wartime improvisation transformed into peacetime self-reliance, driven by necessity rather than urgency. Surveillance added another layer to this modern reality. Unlike wartime reconnaissance, today's monitoring is constant and global. Satellites track tanker movements in near real time. Maritime databases log departures, destinations, and ownership structures. Analysts across the world observe Kharg not through binoculars but through data streams, piecing together patterns from shipping logs, imagery, and trade statistics. This omnipresent observation creates a form of strategic exposure. Nothing dramatic needs to happen for attention to be intense. Even normal operations are interpreted, analyzed, and sometimes politicized. The effect is a persistent, low-level tension. Every tanker leaving the island carries more than crude oil, it carries signals. Markets read those signals for clues about supply, governments interpret them for policy implications, and analysts debate their meaning in reports and briefings. Kharg becomes a silent participant in a global conversation, its actions speaking louder than official statements. This environment rewards predictability but punishes rigidity, forcing the island's operators to balance transparency with strategic ambiguity. Geopolitical pressure compounds these challenges. Kharg sits within a region where alliances shift, rivalries persist, and miscalculations can escalate quickly. Naval exercises, diplomatic disputes, or regional crises can elevate risk perceptions overnight. Even when no direct threat exists, the possibility of disruption influences behavior. Shipping lanes are reassessed, insurance premiums fluctuate, and contingency plans are quietly updated. For Kharg, this means operating in a perpetual state of readiness, where stability is maintained not by calm conditions but by constant vigilance. Yet the island's earlier experiences provide a blueprint for adaptation. Just as redundancy once mitigated physical damage, diversification now mitigates political risk. Export routes vary, operational practices adjust, and strategic reserves buffer uncertainty. Decision-making emphasizes flexibility, allowing responses to be scaled up or down as conditions change. The mindset remains the same: assume disruption is possible, plan accordingly, and avoid single points of failure. In this way, modern pressures reinforce rather than undermine the lessons learned in war. Human factors remain central. Operators, planners, and managers must interpret not only technical data but political signals. A delayed shipment may reflect logistical challenges, diplomatic negotiation, or market strategy. These nuances require judgment that no automated system can fully replace. The island's workforce operates at the intersection of engineering and geopolitics, translating abstract pressure into concrete decisions about timing, routing, and maintenance. Their role underscores a key continuity in Kharg's story: resilience is sustained by people as much as by infrastructure. The invisibility of this struggle is perhaps its most defining feature. Unlike wartime damage, sanctions and surveillance leave no visible scars. Pipelines look intact, tanks stand full, and ships depart as usual. Yet beneath this surface normalcy lies constant adjustment. Compliance checks, risk assessments, and strategic calculations occur daily, shaping operations in ways that outsiders rarely see. This quiet adaptation reinforces Kharg's paradoxical nature: intensely scrutinized yet largely unseen, constrained yet functional. Importantly, these pressures do not exist in isolation. They interact, amplifying one another. Surveillance magnifies the impact of sanctions by increasing transparency. Geopolitical tension heightens market sensitivity to operational changes. Together, they create a complex environment where small decisions can have outsized consequences. A minor delay might ripple through markets, trigger speculation, or prompt diplomatic inquiry. Kharg operates within this interconnected web, where every action is both operational and symbolic. Bringing the story into the present day reveals that Kharg Island's relevance has not diminished, it has transformed. The island is no longer tested primarily by force but by endurance within constraint. Its success is measured not in dramatic survival but in sustained functionality under scrutiny. Each successful export, each uninterrupted flow, represents a quiet negotiation between engineering capability and political reality. As this modern chapter unfolds, uncertainty remains a constant companion. Sanctions evolve, monitoring technologies advance, and geopolitical dynamics shift. There are no permanent solutions, only ongoing adjustments. Yet Kharg's history suggests that adaptability itself is the solution. The same principles that sustained the island through war, redundancy, improvisation, and human resolve, now guide it through an era of invisible pressure. This brings the narrative to a critical juncture. Having survived bombs and navigated sanctions, Kharg stands as a testament to continuity under constraint. But the question lingers: what happens if adaptation is no longer enough? What if pressure crosses a threshold, or a single failure cascades into systemic disruption? To explore that possibility is not to predict disaster, but to understand risk. And it is to that speculative yet grounded question that the story naturally turns next, examining what the silence of Kharg Island might mean for a world that depends on it far more than it realizes. From the pressures of sanctions, surveillance, and international oversight, it is easy to forget that Kharg Island is still, at its core, a physical hub of global energy flow. Pipelines, storage tanks, and loading piers do not just sit passively, they carry hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude every day, feeding economies and industries thousands of miles away. But what happens if that flow suddenly stops? It is a question both technical and strategic, and one that underscores just how critical Kharg Island has become. Imagining the island going silent offers insight into the fragility of the global oil system and the breadth of consequences that hinge on this modest landmass. First, consider a complete operational shutdown due to technical failure. Though systems on Kharg are built with redundancy and safety in mind, no infrastructure is invincible. Pipelines can rupture, storage tanks can fail, or pumping stations can malfunction. In such a scenario, crude production from inland fields would continue, but the ability to move it offshore would stall. The immediate effect would be local: backups in pipelines, overflow in storage tanks, and halted loading schedules. Yet the consequences would not remain local for long. Global oil markets are acutely sensitive to supply interruptions, and even temporary disruptions can trigger price spikes. Futures traders, anticipating shortages, react within minutes. Consumers in Europe, Asia, and the Americas could soon feel the impact in higher fuel prices, increased shipping costs, and inflationary pressure on goods and services. Next, imagine a deliberate blockade or conflict in the Persian Gulf, which could prevent tankers from departing Kharg. The Strait of Hormuz, already one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, becomes a single point of potential global disruption. In this case, the shutdown would ripple across continents, as nations dependent on Iranian oil scramble to secure alternative supplies. Stockpiles might temporarily cushion the impact, but as reserves dwindle, the ripple turns into a wave. Governments and businesses would need to adjust quickly, finding new suppliers, rerouting shipments, or even scaling back operations, each step highlighting how dependent the modern world has become on this single island. Even partial disruptions can have outsized effects. Suppose only some terminals or pipelines were affected by technical issues, accidents, or minor attacks. Export capacity would be reduced, creating uncertainty in markets that thrive on predictability. Traders might interpret partial disruption as a signal of wider instability, driving prices higher than the actual immediate shortage would warrant. This is the paradox of highly concentrated systems. The physical bottleneck magnifies the psychological and economic impact. Kharg Island's silence, even for a limited period, demonstrates how vulnerability and perception intertwine in global energy supply. Beyond the economic consequences, a prolonged shutdown would carry geopolitical implications. Countries heavily dependent on Middle Eastern oil could feel the need to intervene diplomatically, militarily, or strategically to secure alternative routes or negotiate resolutions. The island's operational status is a factor in regional power dynamics. Its inactivity would influence not only energy markets but the broader balance of influence across the Gulf. Nations with spare capacity might leverage the situation to strengthen ties with importers, while those reliant on Iranian exports could find themselves at a disadvantage, creating subtle shifts in alliances and negotiations. Even local environmental and technical challenges could amplify such scenarios. Kharg's infrastructure, while resilient, exists in a marine environment subject to storms, high temperatures, and salt corrosion. A severe storm or technical accident could combine with human errors or political complications to prolong downtime. The island's operators are aware of these compounded risks and maintain contingency plans, but the very existence of these threats illustrates the fragile interplay between nature, human engineering, and geopolitics. In essence, Kharg Island sits at the intersection of multiple systems, each capable of amplifying disruption if the island were to cease operations. Consider also the human factor. While automated systems can maintain flow in some conditions, skilled personnel are essential for complex decision-making under stress. Labor strikes, accidents, or even sudden evacuation due to external threats could exacerbate a shutdown. Unlike purely mechanical systems, human capacity is influenced by morale, safety, and broader societal pressures. The island's functionality is therefore a delicate balance of technology, human expertise, and strategic oversight, all of which must align to prevent silence. The what-if scenario extends beyond mere speculation. It is a practical exercise in understanding global dependency. Analysts, governments, and industry experts constantly consider contingency plans for disruptions at Kharg, ranging from rerouting tankers to tapping strategic reserves. These exercises reveal the scale of global reliance. A single island, covering a few square kilometers, has the power to influence prices, economic stability, and even international diplomacy. In this sense, Kharg is both a hub and a fulcrum, and imagining its inactivity forces a recognition of the vulnerability built into highly centralized supply chains. Finally, envisioning the island going silent highlights why ongoing investment, modernization, and strategic oversight are not luxuries but necessities. Every barrel that leaves Kharg represents the culmination of careful planning, redundant systems, human expertise, and geopolitical navigation. Even temporary disruption illustrates how tightly coupled our global systems are, where minor hiccups can cascade into major consequences. The island's criticality is measured not only by the oil it exports but by the global reactions its operation, or absence, provokes. In contemplating Kharg's potential silence, the lesson becomes clear: modern civilization depends on nodes of extraordinary influence hidden in plain sight. Kharg Island may seem small, remote, and inconsequential, yet it sits at the heart of a network that powers industries, economies, and households worldwide. Its operational continuity is a quiet, often invisible assurance, the absence of which would be felt everywhere, from gas stations to shipping docks, from commodity markets to political negotiations. The island's story, shaped by geography, industry, history, and resilience, becomes most tangible when imagining the alternative, a silent Kharg Island, and the world momentarily slowed by its absence. Even after imagining the catastrophic scenarios that could unfold if Kharg Island were to go silent, one is struck by a more subtle truth: much of the world already watches this modest island closely, often without anyone noticing. Unlike high-profile geopolitical flashpoints, Kharg rarely dominates headlines or news cycles. There are no sweeping images of urban centers or towering skyscrapers. Instead, what draws attention is a quiet, persistent significance, an operational heartbeat whose rhythm influences global markets, diplomatic decisions, and industrial planning. Governments, analysts, and energy traders follow the island's activities with almost clinical precision, and understanding why offers a glimpse into how the modern world monitors its lifelines. At the most basic level, Kharg is a barometer of Iranian oil output. Analysts studying shipment volumes, tanker departures, and storage levels gain insight into how much crude Iran is exporting at any given time. Even small variations can reveal trends in production, refinery efficiency, or geopolitical maneuvering. This monitoring is subtle but consequential. Energy markets adjust in real time to reflect these insights, influencing futures contracts, commodity prices, and even national energy strategies. Traders who understand Kharg's operational rhythm can anticipate fluctuations before they manifest in public markets, gaining an advantage through informed foresight. Governments, too, maintain a constant watch. For countries dependent on Middle Eastern oil, Kharg represents both a source of supply and a potential vulnerability. Satellite imagery, maritime tracking, and intelligence reports provide insight into tanker movements, infrastructure integrity, and operational continuity. These observations are not merely academic, they inform national energy security plans, contingency reserves, and diplomatic strategy. A slight delay in exports, a maintenance schedule, or even a minor logistical hiccup is interpreted within broader geopolitical calculations. In this way, Kharg functions as a strategic indicator, quietly signaling the state of Iranian oil production and, by extension, aspects of regional stability. The island's hidden importance is also magnified by its relative opacity. Because it operates outside public attention, every shipment, repair, or operational change carries a degree of intrigue. Analysts pore over open-source intelligence, satellite feeds, and shipping logs to infer activity, creating a continuous stream of insights. The process mirrors detective work. Small clues are assembled to build a comprehensive understanding of the island's capacity and output. For those in energy, finance, or government, these seemingly minor details are anything but trivial. They constitute the foundation of decision-making that spans continents. The perception of invisibility amplifies the weight of every observation. Financial markets respond not just to what happens on Kharg physically but to the expectation of what might happen. A scheduled maintenance, an unexpected storm, or a geopolitical rumor can influence oil prices before any real impact occurs. Here, Kharg's role extends beyond production. It becomes a psychological pivot, where market actors anticipate disruption and act preemptively. The island's influence is therefore both tangible and symbolic, tangible in the barrels of crude it handles, symbolic in the global confidence or concern its operations inspire. Understanding Kharg is, for traders and analysts alike, about interpreting both action and expectation, reality and perception. Human judgment remains central in monitoring. Engineers, logistics coordinators, and port managers communicate with government liaisons and international partners to ensure that data is accurate, timely, and actionable. Even automated systems cannot capture the nuanced decision-making required in a complex, high-stakes environment. Whether ensuring that pipelines are functioning optimally, monitoring tanker departures, or predicting maintenance bottlenecks, human expertise converts raw operational data into strategic insight. Observers worldwide rely on this flow of information, turning quiet activity on the island into actionable intelligence that can shape markets, policies, and strategic decisions. Another reason for continuous scrutiny is Kharg's geopolitical embeddedness. Situated at a choke point for oil transportation and within reach of regional conflicts, the island can become a bellwether for tension in the Gulf. Unusual shipping activity, military exercises, or sudden changes in operational patterns often signal broader developments. Analysts interpret these indicators not only for market implications but for insights into diplomatic posturing, regional stability, and the potential for escalation. In this sense, Kharg functions as a kind of silent observer. Its operational rhythms and anomalies reveal much about forces beyond its shores. Finally, the quiet attention Kharg receives underscores a broader principle about global infrastructure. The most critical nodes are often the least visible. Cities, industries, and governments may dominate headlines, but it is the islands, pipelines, terminals, and junctions, small, concentrated points of influence, that can drive outcomes on a global scale. Watching Kharg is an exercise in patience and discernment, requiring a blend of technical knowledge, geopolitical awareness, and strategic foresight. Those who track it gain a subtle but powerful understanding, how interconnected systems operate, where vulnerabilities lie, and how small actions can generate outsized consequences. In essence, the world watches Kharg Island quietly because it cannot afford not to. Its operations ripple outward in ways both direct and indirect, shaping markets, informing policy, and signaling the state of global energy security. The island is, in every sense, a silent sentinel, invisible in daily life but critical in its impact. Its continued observation reinforces its relevance, reminding us that modern civilization depends as much on hidden nodes of activity as on visible centers of power. By the time the story reaches its final chapters, it becomes clear that understanding Kharg is not a matter of curiosity alone, it is a matter of comprehending the subtle forces that keep the world's oil flowing, and the fragile systems upon which that flow depends. As we reach the close of our journey across Kharg Island, it is worth pausing to reflect on the paradox it embodies, a small, remote piece of land exerting outsized influence on the modern world. From its modest geographic footprint in the Persian Gulf to its sprawling network of pipelines, storage tanks, and shipping terminals, Kharg Island stands as a testament to the intricate interconnections that underpin contemporary civilization. It reminds us that global systems, energy, finance, trade, and geopolitics, depend as much on unseen nodes as on visible power centers. The story of Kharg, in its quiet complexity, invites a perspective shift. Power is often concentrated in the overlooked, the uncelebrated, and the strategically positioned. The island's significance is rooted first in its geography, a fact made clear when tracing its location and accessibility. Kharg sits near Iran's southern coastline, adjacent to one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, the Strait of Hormuz. Its position allows it to connect inland oil fields to international markets efficiently, making it a natural hub for export. Yet its physical size belies its operational and economic weight. A place that might be skipped on a tourist map or overlooked in casual geography classes is, in fact, a linchpin of global energy security. Understanding this is crucial. The modern economy is not only a network of nations and corporations but also a constellation of vital nodes, each playing a specific, irreplaceable role. History further amplifies Kharg's story. From a quiet island to the target of repeated attacks during the Iran-Iraq War, its resilience under fire demonstrates the alignment of engineering, human skill, and strategic foresight. Redundancy systems, repair crews, and adaptive logistics transformed the island from a vulnerable point into a bastion of continuity. The lessons learned in wartime continue to inform operations today, shaping how the island manages both physical and political risks. Its wartime endurance also underscores a broader principle: critical infrastructure survives not solely through design, but through the persistent effort and ingenuity of the people who operate it. Human commitment, often invisible to the wider world, amplifies the island's significance far beyond steel, concrete, and pipelines. In peacetime, Kharg faces a subtler set of pressures: sanctions, international monitoring, and geopolitical uncertainty. These forces may not leave visible scars, but they shape every decision regarding exports, shipping, and operational planning. The island functions in a constant environment of calculated risk, where compliance, strategy, and diplomacy intersect. Even in the absence of overt conflict, the global community treats Kharg as a bellwether, a subtle but persistent signal of Iran's ability to manage and export crude. This continued scrutiny reflects the quiet awe inspired by such nodes, small, unassuming, and yet pivotal. The operational reality of Kharg Island also illuminates the fragility and interdependence of modern systems. Shutdowns, technical failures, or blockades, even brief ones, can ripple outward to affect fuel prices, supply chains, and international relations. The island's importance is not hypothetical, it is measured daily in the calculations of traders, the scheduling of tankers, and the policies of governments. Here, curiosity intersects with consequence. Understanding Kharg's function reveals the delicate balance that sustains energy flows, reminding us how closely local operations tie into global outcomes. It encourages viewers to appreciate that stability in our everyday lives, filling a car with gas, shipping goods, or running factories, often relies on unseen nodes performing flawlessly behind the scenes. Equally important is the human dimension. Workers, engineers, logistics coordinators, and planners transform infrastructure into a living system capable of responding to disruptions. Their expertise, intuition, and dedication are what make redundancy effective and crisis response possible. Kharg Island exemplifies how people, systems, and environment intersect to create resilience. It is a reminder that even in an era dominated by automation and technology, human judgment remains central to sustaining operations that billions depend upon, quietly bridging the gap between local action and global consequence. The story of Kharg Island also challenges our assumptions about power and influence. Conventional narratives of global significance often focus on capitals, military assets, or multinational corporations. Yet here is a small island that exerts influence through its function, its connections, and its vulnerability. Its importance lies not in visibility but in consequence, and it prompts reflection on how other overlooked nodes, ports, pipelines, data centers, or even small towns, might carry disproportionate weight in the systems we rely upon. This perspective shift fosters a deeper understanding of global interdependence, emphasizing that power is distributed across both seen and unseen infrastructure. Ultimately, Kharg Island serves as both a literal and metaphorical lens through which to view the modern world. It teaches that small places can produce enormous effects, that resilience is a product of design and human skill, and that the continuity of civilization depends on careful management of concentrated, critical points. Whether through wartime survival, adaptation under sanctions, or the precise orchestration of exports, the island exemplifies the principle that global systems function not as monolithic entities but as networks of interdependent nodes. Recognizing this reality enriches our understanding of both energy markets and the architecture of global stability. As we step back from Kharg Island's docks, pipelines, and silent monitoring stations, the final takeaway is clear: attention to small, overlooked nodes changes the way we perceive power, influence, and vulnerability. Modern life, from energy consumption to economic planning, depends on them. Kharg Island reminds us that while headlines may focus on capitals or conflicts, the quiet, unassuming outposts often do the heavy lifting. Appreciating their role inspires both awe and reflection, a recognition that even the smallest places can shape the largest outcomes. In a world that rarely pauses to notice the unseen, Kharg Island stands as a quiet sentinel, keeping the wheels of global civilization turning, one barrel at a time. Kharg Island quietly keeps the world's oil flowing, but how many other hidden places hold the same kind of power? Comment below which overlooked places you think could have global consequences. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that rarely make headlines.